So you're attempting to have a conversation with a native Spanish speaker and you can basically understand everything that they're telling you. But then it is your turn to speak, but when you try to, nothing comes out of your mouth. And one reason for that is you are afraid of speaking Spanish with a native Spanish speaker. And it's nothing to feel ashamed about, but something that you need to be aware of, because when you feel very scared in these types of moments when you're trying to have a conversation, then that's when nothing is passing through your mind whatsoever. You can't think of the right verb conjugation. You can't think of even like the most simplest phrases like ¿Cómo estás? It's quite interesting that just having a fear of speaking Spanish can shut off your brain completely and leave you in a very frozen state. You should also take note of where these conversations are happening. So if you're having a conversation with maybe one of your friends, maybe you won't have as much fear, or if you're having a one-on-one online Spanish lesson on italki, then again, you might feel more comfortable. But let's say that you're put in a situation where you're talking or you are part of a group and they're all Spanish speakers and then they're asking you a whole bunch of questions. Now, this is a moment that I have experienced personally. I would feel very afraid and then I wouldn't speak at all. Another reason why you wouldn't be able to speak but can comprehend is because you're consuming a lot of content in Spanish. And this is actually a really good thing that you are doing that. But when it comes to speaking, it becomes a challenge because these two skills, they are very connected, speaking and listening comprehension. But at the same time, you have to practice them individually. And I found this out after I graduated college because I was taking college level Spanish courses. So I thought that I had so much knowledge and that I was going to be able to speak very fluently. And that is not what happened whatsoever after I graduated, because I went to Mexico. Then I found out really quick that everything that was in my head, I could not make it come out in sentences. So that's something that you should definitely be aware of, is how much that you are consuming in Spanish versus just speaking. You have to train yourself to speak and make that a habit so you can increase your speaking abilities. And I know it can seem very strange and confusing that after all the studying that you're doing, whether that's writing out sentences over and over again, and you're also memorizing a lot of vocabulary, and then also doing verb conjugations, that you can't just say it even though it's all up in your head. But that's how it works. Vocabulary is another reason why you may not be able to speak to a native Spanish speaker the way that you want to. And not just in the quantity of vocabulary words that you have, but also in the context of the words themselves. For example, there are a lot of saludos, so greetings in the Spanish language. And just because you understand, let's say, a few of them, it doesn't necessarily mean you know how to respond to them. For example, you won't only be saying estoy bien to respond to different greetings in Spanish. Here are just a few out of the many greetings that you might hear. We have hola, ¿qué tal ha ido? ¿Cómo te va? ¿Qué tal estás? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Qué está pasando? ¿Cómo va todo? And ¿qué onda? One of my Spanish-speaking friends from Mexico would always say "qué onda" to me, and I didn't really know how to respond because I was like, oh, does this mean like what's up, or like what are you going to be doing? How are you doing? So I didn't really know how to respond to that, even though I could hear clearly that he said "qué onda." So instead of responding, I just said "qué." You also have lack of vocabulary, but in specific topics. So you may be very strong in talking about sports and TV shows, but when you have a conversation about like the weather or let's say science, you may not know what to say at all because you have never had a conversation about that, or you don't necessarily study that type of vocabulary. So you just have no idea what to say. Now, let's talk about a situation where you're able to comprehend everything that a native Spanish speaker is saying, and you also have a lot of vocabulary with a lot of different topics, right? But at the same time, you still don't understand why you're not able to speak Spanish the way that you want to. You can't say anything even though you have all this vocabulary. And one reason for that is because you are not able to combine all these words together. You can't just have words and phrases on their own, but you have to be able to construct sentences together that's going to make all of those things make sense. So that's why a lot of transitional words are going to help with that. So you have y, which is and, posiblemente, which is possibly, you have pero, which is but, then you have también, which means also. You will realize how much more easier it is to be able to construct a sentence when you are speaking Spanish, when you include these types of words, versus just saying a lot of different phrases that aren't connected, because that's what I used to do a lot. So I studied a whole bunch of phrases, so I had them and they were really good, they were very helpful, but I wasn't able to make really good sentences at all, and all my sentences were very broken up. You have a lot of vocabulary, but you just aren't using what you know. Now, this has happened to me, oddly enough, in a lot of conversations with my friends. I understand everything that my friend is saying, but then when I try to speak, I fumble over my words, and I just don't know what to say whatsoever. And this has happened because I'm trying to express myself in a way that I haven't done before, or I'm trying to use a word in Spanish that I don't even know. It's very weird, and I don't know how I got this habit, but basically I would always try to say like a very complex word that I didn't know how to use. So instead of responding with, oh yeah, estoy bien, está bien, I would try to say something like really fancy. I would fumble over my words a lot. I would just stop mid-sentence trying to figure out what word I wanted to use, instead of just using the vocabulary that I already knew and I was comfortable with and I could use in context to make a sentence that actually made sense, and also one that I could say it very fluently. And it could be I was just trying to impress him with a whole bunch of complex words that I didn't know. Now we have the speed at which a native Spanish speaker is speaking to you. When I was in the Dominican Republic, sometimes I would hear a question that was so fast to me, I could understand it, but then when I tried to speak, I was like completely frozen and nothing came out of my mouth. And that was because my brain was trying to match that speed as well. So they were like, ¿Qué lo que? ¿Cómo tú estás? Like that, but I could not respond with that same pace whatsoever. This also happened to me because I was always comparing myself to Dominicans and to the way that they speak. So I was always trying to respond so rapidly so I could sound like them, so I could feel like I was more a part of the Dominican culture and things like that. But it didn't really help me. You have to learn how to walk before you run. Conjugating verbs in Spanish, we all know, is incredibly difficult and it takes a long time to get the hang of it. And that's why when you are speaking, this can be extremely difficult to even complete a sentence because you need a verb to be able to do so and to do it correctly. So that's why you really have to practice your verb conjugation so you can be able to speak. You might be able to understand that native Spanish speaker just fine, but trying to say the exact same thing back to them and there's a verb conjugation that you don't know how to use, that can cause a problem. One verb that I always mess up, that always makes me pause during a Spanish conversation, is preferir. And preferir means to prefer. So I'm just going to read a few of the different conjugations that we have so you can hear a little bit of how complex it is. Preferí, preferiste, prefirieron, prefirieron. Oof, that's quite difficult, especially if you have other verbs that you have to conjugate in the same sentence and then also trying to say them very smoothly. Mi familia y yo preferíamos. Check out the link in the description box to learn more about this little book of Spanish verbs. And that version actually has 555 fully conjugated verbs, so it has more than this one. So you hear all these words, you know how to spell them, and you know exactly what they mean, but when you try to say them, you just can't pronounce them. Now, this causes a lot of problems for Spanish learners as well, especially for me. I feel like this happens to me basically every single day, that I get probably halfway through a word before I repeat it because I messed up the pronunciation of it. Here are a few Spanish words that always get me tripped up when I am trying to speak. Zoológico, psicología, geólogo, biólogo, arqueólogo, arqueólogo, something like that, arqueólogo, and inmediatamente. One thing I've noticed that Spanish learners do when they are having conversations in Spanish is they think too heavily in grammar. So before they even respond to a question, they are trying to figure out which grammar rule that maybe that question that they got asked applies to, or which verb conjugation is this? Is it conditional? Is it a subjunctive? So they're going through this whole process in their head before they even speak. So just imagine how long it would take to respond to a question or to finish your sentence because you're trying to figure out how to conjugate something or what the grammar structure is. And you're like thinking of all of your notes that you have written previously so you can come up with the correct word and come up with the correct sentence. The place that you want to be in is where you can say a sentence. You have the understanding of these different grammar concepts, but you're not thinking about them. Like right now, when I am speaking English, I am not thinking of a whole bunch of grammar jargon, right? I am just speaking freely and I'm speaking fluently, or at least trying to. So that's what you need to do when you're speaking Spanish as well. So it's almost like you're thinking less and it's just automatic. You don't have to think so much. You don't have to think so hard about it. When you speak, it just comes out naturally and it's very smooth. Maybe you just don't have enough confidence in yourself when you are speaking Spanish. And this is not just because like you're afraid to speak, but it's because you are second guessing yourself. Now, I've done this a lot where I'm talking with one of my friends and he's someone that I can confide in. It's a very comfortable interaction, right? And I didn't have confidence in the words that I was using. So what I would do was always change the first word that I said. So if I said, for example, perro, which is dog, then I'm like, oh no, gato. Gato, which is cat. So I would just switch my words over and over again because I didn't think that I had it right. But then my friend would tell me, oh yeah, you did say that right. Like why'd you change your word for? So don't do that because it's gonna make it very challenging just trying to get through one sentence. Now, do you feel ready to start speaking Spanish fluently and not just understand native Spanish speakers? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. As well, if you don't know how to understand native Spanish speakers, I have made a video just on that, and you can find the link to it in the description box of this video. Nos vemos en el próximo video.